Welcome back to Brown Girls Money Moves, where we hear from South Asian women founders and the investors backing them. I'm your host, Bhargavi Varma.
Welcome back to Brown Girls Money Moves, where we hear from South Asian women founders and the investors backing them. I'm your host, Bhargavi Varma. There's a particular kind of vindication that comes when the niche, complicated thing that you've spent years explaining to skeptical investors suddenly becomes dinner table conversation. For Rathna Sharad, founder of FlavorCloud, the moment arrived with the recent wave of COVID and again with global tariffs. Overnight, cross-border shipping went from an industry footnote to something even your auntie has an opinion on. Now her company is layering AI onto a platform that already helps consumer brands untangle customs, compliance, and logistics across all borders. Joining her is Mahati Sridhar from Revolution's Rise of the Rest Fund, which backed FlavorCloud back at the pre-seed stage and has built its entire thesis around finding founders in the cities that everyone else overlooks. We talk about what it means to be married to the problem long before you have a business plan, why place can be a founder's unfair advantage instead of a limitation, and how to actually build trust with investors when the world is on fire around you, and what separates founders who are just along for the ride from the ones who turn a moment of chaos into their moment. I hope you enjoy.
Thank you, Rathna. Thank you, Mahati. I'm so excited to have you both on the Brown Girls Money Moves podcast. I always like starting the podcast with what I feel is so integral to South Asian culture, which is we celebrate. We really love to celebrate. So let's start with the moment of celebration. Rathna, I believe you recently rolled out, and you have to give us the timeline on this, XBAI as a new feature. And we actually saw Mahati sharing that as well, as a proper investor should do. I feel kind of, starting this new chapter in some way.
Super excited about XBAI. And we launched that earlier this year, actually at Manifest, which was in January. But it is really a culmination of all of the AI native work. Our platform, FlavorCloud, really leverages AI for every single one of these cross-border complexities, if you will. So whether it is classification or the customs and compliance aspects or routing intelligence. So we've been embracing AI before the LLMs, but it's a very exciting chapter. Obviously, I feel so lucky to be a founder in this age and really building it in this time. And so conversational AI is definitely the next, the evolution of all of the work that we've done, and really making it super simple. What makes cross-border really hard is that, it's domain knowledge. It is so complex, and it's hard for our merchants and partners and really consumers to understand what's going on. And it should be seamless. So you should be able to really have a conversation and understand, can I ship this product to this country, or what does it mean to, comply with local regulations, maybe in Canada or in Mexico or whatever it is that, you need to ship, because now you need to be a global brand, and really understanding that, bringing the simplicity with a conversational interface is what XBAI is all about.
So that was super helpful. I would love to set you up for a scenario. Something that you have to also let me know if you've experienced this or not. You're at a dinner party or maybe a wedding, something in the community, and auntie comes up to you and says, first of all, she always, of course, starts with something unwarranted that you didn't ask for, like you look like you're working too hard. And then she says, I heard you're shipping things. I heard something like that. What is FlavorCloud? How would you explain it to auntie who has not run a business, doesn't understand what even cross-border might mean? What is FlavorCloud and what does it do?
Really making international shipping easy. So if you are buying a product from, let's say, China, maybe you're shopping on Temu, or maybe you're shopping on Shein, or maybe you're shopping on Amazon, and the parcel actually is coming from, China or Vietnam, or you're shopping on Etsy for Indian clothes. That is where cross-border really is happening. And as part of that, the tracking experience, the shipping experience, that's what we do. We make it super simple for that to happen.
At the outset, for anyone hearing that doesn't have a business or doesn't have a product, just the idea of taking something that is very complex and simplifying it is something I feel everybody resonates with, service business or not even in business. I want to dive into that a bit more, but let's get Mahati in here, because I really, really think the firm you're at and the thesis is so important to talk about. And I think it's also a good way to also talk about where Rathna's based and get into some of those things. So you're a partner at Revolution, Mahati, and just for those who don't know, it's a firm started by AOL co-founder Steve Case, and you lead the Rise of the Rest Fund, which, from how I understand it, that the fund primarily invests in startups that are kind of outside the, let's call it, traditional hubs of Silicon Valley, New York, Boston, and maybe there's more that you can add to the mix. Help us understand, and to a founder and an investor listening, why have this thesis? Why is that important? Why is the lesser tapped market important to the fund and to you?
Yeah, totally. Well, first off, thank you so much for having me, and love seeing Rathna represent Seattle and many other places like the rest that we invest into. It's exactly, how you painted the picture. So our fund was founded by Steve Case, and he very proudly built AOL, American Online, in McLean, Virginia. And many places like McLean, Virginia, Chicago, Illinois, Austin, Texas, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. All of these places are seemingly the underdog or undercity compared to your New York City or Silicon Valley when you think about the amount of capital that's being deployed, the concentration of talent. But that doesn't necessarily say that they're lesser in any way, shape, or form. There are incredible people building incredible businesses in all of these places, and our fund was really built to capitalize and tap into those markets. And there's, an underlying reason as well is that we see that a rising tide lifts all boats, and that when you see a startup from your ecosystem succeed, it empowers other people to go out there and start building and being able to be a part of that entrepreneurial ecosystem. So more innovation is happening, more startups are created, and that flywheel is something we're really proud to be a part of and to invest into, and honestly just to meet incredible people all across this country. And so, tactically for us, we've been able to do this. We've lit up almost 38, 40-ish states and territories in the United States where we have investments. Companies for us are ranging everywhere from CPG to defense and cybersecurity, lots in the supply chain and logistics space, just like where Rathna is building. So it's been really awesome to lean into all of these spaces where many investors may not be spending as much time.
I'd like to get into a little bit later kind of how you, because hearing that as someone based in Toronto, building Brown Girl Angels as a global collective, there's the question for me is that sounds wonderful, but sounds so big. When you look at moving outside, it's how does the fund and how do you kind of create some structure around that? But we'll get to that in a second. Rathna, something I've noticed that founders often build from is just experiencing the pain point themselves. And so I understand that you were running a company prior to this, Runway to Street, and that you had some of these logistics issues. So can you kind of tell us a bit about the connection point from what you experienced and kind of how it led to, hey, this is a problem that I can't be the only one who has it?
Yeah, it actually started with me as a consumer. I shop a lot, and I shop a lot from international brands, and that experience as a consumer was so horrendous that it got me thinking about my past life. I built cross-border experiences working for carriers, forwarders, 3PLs, and then I was at Microsoft running marketplace monetization, D2C, which I knew was the future. But the two were very disparate circles and didn't intersect. And therefore, I started Runway to Street really to bring those two together with technology, thinking that it was an SMB problem. So really brands didn't have the means to enable international because of the complexity of shipping, customs, compliance, all of those things. So that's what Runway to Street was meant to do. We scaled to over 300 brands in 100 countries, selling to 200. And what we thought was an SMB problem turned out to be that the complexity is even greater scale for the larger brands. And they didn't really want to be in the marketplace, but they wanted to leverage what we built, which is the tech stack that enabled shipping, customs, compliance automation anywhere to anywhere. That became the really powerful piece. So there was a need to take the logistics and the compliance and customs layer and really make that a service. And we could also see that in that time, cross-border was growing. It was no longer, it's a nice to have. And I could see that it was going to be the future because of connected commerce, social commerce, and where it was going. So I kind of predicted that we would get here, not just that, but obviously we've taken many different turns to get here to this day, where cross-border is 40 to 60% of any brand's traffic today, right? It's not even about, they're not even trying. That's organic traffic. And so it's a very exciting place to be because of that. So I guess from actually experiencing running a marketplace, managing the e-commerce experience, working with fashion, beauty, accessories, which is really core cross-border, it became apparent that what was necessary was really the service layer that we could enable any brand anywhere in the world to go global. By simply plugging into that service. And so that led to the creation of FlavorCloud for this much greater vision and mission to enable every brand to be a global brand.
Listening to the scope of what you've built out, and you see it on your website, you see it on the resources section especially, like you're talking not to, this is for, as you mentioned, this is just for enterprise, or this is just for consumer. You really are talking across verticals. And I asked this question for the founder that's, identified a pain point and feels like, wow, this is a huge market. This is a problem for so many. And I've heard this in conversations that I've had that they're like, it's exciting, but it's overwhelming.
Yeah.
And so can you take us back to, this is something that I should build, and I've experienced this. I see this as being a large TAM, total addressable market for a founder who isn't familiar with that jargon. Where does one start, and where did you start with that, with this, identifying this and wanting to build this?
Yeah, so going back to my time at Microsoft, as I talked about me as a consumer seeing the pain, and also realizing that this is a pain worth solving, right? This is a massive opportunity because I could see cross-border get where it is at today and beyond, really, and that I also realized that because these were very disparate worlds, having come from the logistics world, it is a very legacy world. There isn't not a lot of technology. I was building technology for these companies, but there's so much opportunity. And what excites me typically is that intersection where there's massive business problems that can be solved through technology. That's always been the ethos and where I operate best. So I could see these disparate worlds that I could bring together. So e-commerce was something we were powering at Microsoft. It was, D2C was so exciting and growing. And this big, gap between cross-border and D2C that you could really be the glue with technology. So it was two things. It was the opportunity in itself that was really exciting, and second was I felt equipped to bring these disparate worlds together because that was uniquely my journey. And so I think that's important. And so it's not like I always wanted to be a founder. It's just that I fell in love with the problem, and it was business, napkin math, if you will. That was the business plan, and then I was like, I could, just sit on it, and I sat on it, and then I was like, well, if I don't do this, I couldn't, live with that. It's okay to try and fail, and I would be happy with that because I actually gave it a shot. So it came to a point where I was like, well, I'm just going to have to do this because it's very much what I want to do and can do. And so I quit Microsoft along with my co-founder and started Runway to Street. Obviously, not knowing what it takes to build a startup, scale a startup, and that naivety, if you will, actually, helped me because I didn't know what I was getting into because you don't often know. And certainly in Seattle, it's a bit more insular. Not many people want to leave their, I had a fantastic, role at Microsoft, and often people don't leave those to go, start a company. And so not knowing was a good thing because it is a hard journey.
There are so many women, and I'm sure in your world, actually, we did a chai and chat in Seattle last year, and meeting women who have very similar journeys, right? They're in something that they've been doing, they've built subject matter expertise, they identify a problem, but it's oh my gosh, should I go? I don't know what this looks like. What's this journey? And then maybe some have a little bit of knowledge of, oh, I heard raising's really hard and all of those kinds of things. Like, what was that? Have you always operated well in uncertainty? There's something you said, and I feel like I'm asking the question and I kind of saying the nugget that you said, and I want to just make sure I say it out loud, which is that you couldn't live with the idea of not. I would like to just hear you kind of talk about what made you go from, like you described, a great job and a stability, let's call it that, into this unknown. And Mahati, I would like you to please maybe jump off of that and kind of talk about, is that actually a bit of that what you look for in the magic sauce of a founder who's willing to make that jump? And I'd love to hear that as an investor lens as well from you before we dive into kind of how you both connected. So yeah, Rathna, like what made you do that?
So trying and failing is perfectly fine in my book. I always knew I could go back and get that job. In fact, a different, better job at the end of it. But I guess I had that. I also, had family that was supportive. I didn't need to, I could just fund my company. I could just do that. I had the luxury of doing that. Most folks don't have that. And so I recognize it's hard to do, but that's the leap you've got to make because it is a massive leap. And in that sense, that's all I wanted to do was solve the problem. I was, really married to the problem, if you will. And it was the most exciting thing. And I couldn't live with not giving it a shot.
Is that what you like to hear in an investor conversation the first time you have one, Mahati? Like, is that something that comes up a lot?
Yeah, I think like for us, we over-index a ton on the person or the people that are building these businesses. Being early stage investors, that's really all we have to go off of. And as you think about pattern matching, at the end of the day, it always boils down to the people. How are they building it? What's drawing them to this problem? What uniquely enables these founders to have an edge in whatever space or whatever they're building and why they're building it? I mean, Rathna, I couldn't have echoed or like put together a better story or found a better example. Like she felt something so insatiable that she had to chase it. No matter where that path would have taken her, whether it was a dead end or a pier or like an incredible bridge or journey, which we are on together, which is incredible. But it's just you have that tick, that's something that keeps you up at night, that's really driving you forward, because being a founder is hard. It is one of the hardest jobs on the planet because you're really navigating sort of an untraversed path, and being able to deal with that ambiguity, being able to manage making decisions, wearing all the hats, playing all the roles, and growing, that's a hard thing to do. And being able to work with those people, from my perspective, is a real treat. And we get to see lots of these people talk to lots of folks, understand like what makes them tick, what gets them excited, where they want feedback, how they want to work. And it's again, just like finding folks that we feel most excited to roll up our sleeves with, get into the trenches with, acknowledging that the journey is not going to be easy and it's not, clean cut, and just being able to get excited about traversing that with them.
That was so beautifully put. When there's founders, I'm sure, that come into your orbit where, I mean, Rathna, like you were made to build this, like the way your journey and the identification of the problem, the experience of the problem, the background, all of that. Are there times, Mahati, that you meet founders who maybe don't come from that world and who are like, I've not come from this world, I know nothing about it? And so what do you think of that? And have you invested in founders who are like, we hear of this, and I'm trying to think of an example right off the top of my head, but where they're not from medicine, but they're starting to build in healthcare. And so what are your thoughts on kind of how do you kind of receive that?
Yeah, definitely. I think my question would be like, why? Why are you doing this then? Like, why are we having this conversation? What is compelling you to dedicate the next 5-10 years of your career to building in this space you know nothing about, have no ties to, et cetera, et cetera? And oftentimes in that, you'll kind of unpack it. So for the healthcare example, I think that's a great one. I've chatted with a founder recently who is not from the healthcare field. They're actually from the fintech financial services field, and they're building a healthcare business, and they are excited about it because of a personal journey that a loved one has taken and how they saw the system fail them. And so for them, being able to like unpack and learn about how healthcare works, how the specific niche work, what that pain point is, how many other people have faced it, and sort of starting to address like what that problem is, and not really knowing what the solution is yet, but knowing that they want to tackle and like uncover what a good solution could be. That is a story and a narrative that makes sense to me, because ultimately what I'm trying to find is like, what is fueling that fire for you as a founder to go build what you want to build? In Rathna's case, she's had, career experience. She has personal excitement for this space. Like, it all like makes a ton of sense. But in other places where it's maybe less obvious, doing that digging to understand that is critical. I think like at the end of the day, for me, being able to really feel that fire and be able to see that it's not just a quick flame, something that'll go out in 2 years, but rather something a little bit more long-standing is what I'm trying to assess, because, like we mentioned, this is not an easy journey, and I don't want someone who's going to give up the second it gets really challenging. That's a really expensive bet to take on someone who's going to be so short-lived. And so I want to really focus on people that are willing to understand the bet that like we're taking, and also the risk that they're taking to try and build this business, and are steadfast and so passionate about what they're doing it and why they're doing it.
It is such a nice setup to then asking the question of how did you both meet, and talking about who found who. And this could also be a good time for us to also talk about where do you, Mahati, like say, okay, we are now looking at the Pacific Northwest, and we are now like, what is that structure that the fund has around, it's the massive opportunity that's outside these three hubs?
We invested in Rathna out of our first fund, I think in 2019, so predates my time at the fund. So I was not the initial investor that met Rathna, but have been working really closely with her.
In a seed round, early.
It was super early, super early for us in our fund. But I've been working closely with her for the last 4 or 5 years, which has been incredible. And for us, how we were able to find her was a little bit of that sort of like geo-focused approach. So spending some time in the Pacific Northwest, trying to really uncover who are the people here, who are those super nodes in the ecosystem that have a good pulse on the various people and entrepreneurial hubs around that have, are those super centers for people to kind of like navigate to, and what are people building here? What is exciting here? And with Rathna, building this incredible supply chain logistics business, in Seattle, super, super strategic, right? One, incredible talent hub with folks coming from Microsoft, from Amazon, from all of these other like larger software companies spinning out, leveraging their backgrounds to build something cool, exactly what Rathna did herself. But then also, Seattle is so strategically located as you think about it from a logistics perspective. So there are a lot of really awesome subject matter experts that are present in that space. And so sort of leveraging, again, place as a superpower, we saw that what Rathna was building, where she was, and why she was doing it, like those three came together in such a beautiful way, which is how we were able to sort of like jump on in at pre-seed, seed stage, I believe, and have been along for the ride ever since.
Rathna, how did you receive that, and what was happening in your life and in your journey of fundraising when they came into the picture or into your world?
It's been this long, really rich journey with Rise of the Rest. I mean, it predates her, but the pre-seed was where, I had the engagement with Anna. She found us through all of this triangulation, because Seattle really does not have that VC ecosystem. And so it was Rise of the Rest team was an incredible match, and they were, every step of the way since, all the way to RB. They've been involved and really great partners. And I've got to spend a lot of time with Mahati over the last, 4 or 5 years, I think now.
Yeah.
So it's been really incredible.
So was it a cold email? I asked this question. I just did a podcast where it was the founder who sent a cold LinkedIn message to the investor. And I was saying to her that sometimes founders want to hear this, that and she was talking about sending a targeted message and not like spilling your entire story in there. So I'm curious for you, was it just a cold email? Was it a conversation through an angel?
I've never done the cold email thing actually with investors along the entire journey. So I don't know how exactly, Anna conversation came about, but it really was something that went very quickly. I remember that because I was at vacation trying to get on the call and get the seed round done, because we had, a specific amount, and I'm pretty sure it was a warm intro through one of my someone in my network. I want to say it was a founder, but ultimately that led to a conversation, and it just became it went pretty quickly because it was a relatively small round that we were doing then.
I also have to say, for the space that you're in, it would be ridiculous to not ask you about the world events of the past few years. I mean, you are in the center, eye of the storm, the middle of the vortex. I mean, pick a phrase. So let's go back a little bit. I am sure this is something you've been asked about, and most probably you're like, I don't want to talk about that anymore. But we do have to talk about the world of COVID and what that was like for you with FlavorCloud. Like, just take us through that.
I think there's a unique breed of founders in this time frame. Over the last, we did our
during
Series
COVID.
A literally during COVID. Like, I remember I didn't meet a single person in person, right? That wasn't a thing. So it was all Zoom meetings, and I actually got out of it thinking, well, I'm not going up and down and actually meeting people. I'm actually much more efficient just getting all the Zoom meetings done, and it was a much more efficient process. And it was just, those were very uncertain times. Obviously, COVID was for everybody, and it certainly was for us. It was, a unique moment as a founder to really, I had a small team then. We were all in Seattle. It was, I want to say, 7 or so folks. So I just had, engineering, product, actually no product. I was running product, and then I had a sales and a customer success person. So it was a really small team, and my co-founder, obviously, the CTO. But it was how do you, as a company, come to terms with what's next? and react to the market, but really stay alive, was the next thing. And how do we help our brands deal with this enormous reality that they didn't know what was going on? And I think that is a very unique experience to go through, because you learn a lot from it. In hindsight, COVID was actually a great thing, because it was an accelerant. It really ended up being a great way for us to get to Series A and really go through that. But again, the last year and a half, a dramatic impact for us, specifically our industry, right? I mean, every single person knows tariff. Your question about this auntie, she knows what a tariff is, right? That didn't happen. Like, nobody knew what it was just before last year, and so that again is put us in the spotlight in a lot of different ways. Yes, uncertainty. Q2, nobody knew what was happening. It was paralysis on the brand side, because they were impacted in so many different ways, and it was going back and forth on the tariffs. So their wholesale business, their retail business, their sourcing, everything was impacted, not just thinking cross-border. But that kind of impact was, again, an enormous learning experience. But for us, it really is, we thrive in complexity. That's pretty core to what we do. We simplify complexity. So it really is an enormous tailwind, because this stuff, cross-border commerce is expanding twice as fast as regular e-commerce. Brands cannot ignore it. And that means they need to make investments in technology and platforms like us, so they are nimble, they're able to adapt quickly, and also compete effectively, because other brands that are adopting that have an unfair advantage. And so the complexity just keeps increasing, because now you have EU changes happening this year on July 1st, and that's even more significant than the US changes, and then UK is coming, and other countries are going to follow suit. Everyone's following the money. So if you think about governments, they want a piece of the pie, piece of the cross-border pie, because it's becoming the bigger part of the commerce pie. And as everything is still moving more and more online, and that's the case for APAC and other countries, where the adoption is still increasing, and increasing really fast, thanks to all of the changes in AI as well. And so really interesting times. And as a founder, the one thing you do not control is timing, right? I always think about, when we were doing Runway to Street, we were really early to the market. It was still nascent international. But when I think about FlavorCloud, we're right at the point where this is the time. This is the right time to be doing what we're doing. And so in that sense, very grateful.
FlavorCloud really exists to take complexity and simplify it. I love what you're saying, because it's hey, throw us more complex. We're here to show you why we exist, and in fact prove why you need us time and time again. I mean, not that you're like, hey, can we manufacture another global problem so that I can prove this to you? But I mean, it is really rising to the occasion, which I'm like, oh, that just works so perfectly that that's also part of the name of the fund. Mahati, the question I hear often, and this is especially for being early to the table, it applies to how maybe angels would want to hear this, because again, angels are also early to the table. When there's something difficult, unprecedented, going through, happening in a business, how does an investor show up?
No, that's a great question. I think, there's examples of investors showing up in lots of different ways. I think the best thing and most important thing is really understanding the investor-founder relationship, because the way I work with each of my founders is really different. The way we communicate, the way we lean in, it's really different, and it's being respectful of that relationship. I mean, think about it yourself. The way you talk with your mother or your mother-in-law is very different than the way you talk to your child or your sibling. And so in the same way, like with your founders, like you need to understand what the other person needs, how they best receive information, how they best receive support, and navigate it sort of in that capacity. So for some of our founders, it's, hey, week by week, especially in those early innings, combat, checking in, what do you need? How can we be helpful? Taking on some projects and doing some of that work for them. Maybe, it's a little bit less frequently, especially as companies start to mature, they have a larger cap table, they have more investors that they are beholden to. And so doing week by week, that's not the best use of a founder's time or really anybody's time. And so on a quarterly basis, how can we touch base? What do you need? How can we be helpful? Of course, if anything happens intermittently, jumping on the phone, being able to engage quickly, that's what we do. But I think it's like understanding how that founder best needs us to show up as a person, but also as a fund, and the resources that we provide, and then being able to handle each ask as tactically as we can. It's always evolving, ever changing, very different timelines, but also like Rathna said, time is the most important component here. Showing up at the right moment with the right type of resources is what's most valuable.
When maybe speaking specifically to Mahati, like what is the onus on a founder and how does a founder communicate? Or is it, you've been working with me, can't you tell Mahati what I need? Like how do you kind of see that relationship, and maybe share as well how it worked when, how did it work with reaching out to Mahati during this time?
I think, it's very much what she said. It is about having the ideal cadence, if you will, and I'm always reaching out when I need help, keeping investors informed, because I think of them as extended team. I'm very lucky to have an incredible the investor that sits on our board, so certainly the board members, and then our investors, I reach out, I keep them updated on a regular basis, but it really is about, I know who to reach out to for what, so you have the right person as well. So it's not like it's the same communication to everybody. That happens, but that's just, letting people know where things are at, so you're not surprised, and that's something I think, founders should do. And I've learned from other founders that have done it well. But it is really tailoring that communication, because I want the best use of time and expertise where it's necessary. I pull on it, and I go back to Mahati and say, "Can you do this research for me? I need to find out more on this." And so that may be outside of a cadence. It's just this is what I'm looking for, and I know she can help there. And I might go to a different investor for a different need because, they have an intro they can make or some other type of thing. So really understanding who are the folks in your network, where can they bring their expertise and value and help you, because it is a very lonely journey as a founder. You need your core group of support and should be able to leverage them as needed.
Mahati, to portcos have access to the LPs, is that something that the fund, because I believe there's quite a few prominent executives that are part of your LP community, so is that something that you tap into, and is that something founders have access to?
That's a great question. Yeah. So as our founders continue to grow and mature, especially, as they have asks for who they can connect with and plug into, we have made several great introductions and have working partnerships between some of our portfolio companies and some of the companies and enterprises that many of our LPs represent or are working for or have founded themselves. And so that is one of the great ways that we're able to add value as a fund. And I think, like Rathna said, introductions are a currency here. So being able to help connect our founders to the right person, however or whomever that right person may be, whether it's an LP for us, whether it's another investor or a recruiter or the right person or talent that they're looking to help sort of build out their team, it can manifest in a lot of different ways. And so for us, whomever we know and however we know them, being able to amplify our founders in front of them is something that we're always trying to do.
I want to really frame the entry into the FlavorCloud world, Rathna, because there's a lot of South Asian women in the founder ecosystem who are building in consumer and many other businesses as well. But can you really get tactical to, okay, this is the stage of your growth that you're at, or this is the stage of your company. Here's when you should start thinking about FlavorCloud. Here's when you need to start engaging with us.
So typically, so we enable consumer brands. So this is CPG category, right? So no category is off limits, really. Every single category, CPG category, has gone online. I'd say the only, or cross-border, the only one that hasn't probably is restricted commodities, like, those that cannot be shipped, usually firearms and certain drugs and things like that. So really, you're talking about any vertical. I think the best time to engage with FlavorCloud is when you have a brand, you understand your end consumer, and you really understand that domestically, right? That typically happens at, somewhere, I'd say about 10 million GMV is the sweet spot where, you figured all of that out, and you're now able to take some of that and say, okay, I should be thinking about all the traffic that's coming organically that is global, and how do I think about expanding the brand? So I'd say that's the sweet spot.
One of the things too, and that's super helpful as a framework. Personally, I would say that's almost like a goalpost. It's like, hey, I've reached this point. Now is when I can engage. It's a good goalpost to have. It's a question I dance around this question because part of what we do and part of the reason for this podcast is to show that investors and founders in verticals across everything can look like this, can look like us. You're in logistics. I'm trying to connect the dots without saying it. What has it been like being a brown woman showing up in these spaces and building in these spaces?
Just even a woman showing up in logistics is really hard, right? Let alone a brown woman. It is a very, male-dominated space. It is also one where that's the network. It is a very tight, network. So the fact that I come from logistics and that world, and I can speak the language of logistics and the expertise that I bring in is really, how you get around that. Because you're not suddenly, hanging out with that group, and so you've got to break through. But in general, brown women, I don't know of any really. And I probably know all the women in the logistics space that are in leadership for sure.
Would you say that that's something that you give as a tip? And I'm sure you've spoken to founders. Founders speak to founders. This is a known fact. Mm-hmm. Is that something that you would say, hey, if you're operating in a space, I'm thinking of a founder, for example, building in construction right now. Speaking the jargon part of the entry?
Just knowing the space is part of the entry, right? You've got to come in with authority in the space to break in.
Mahati, is that, and I asked this question because, we've had quite a few, early stage investors on here, and it's conversations around conviction, conversations around founder fit, conversations around, pivoting, all of this and uncertainty. And especially in early stage when, women hear, hey, I have an idea, I have some traction. They keep asking, have more traction before you should come raise. Can you give us a bit more on, as an investor, what are some of the other things you look for?
Yeah, totally. I'll take that in two separate ways to go back to sort of your first example, on that traction piece, because I think that's always so hard, right? First and foremost, every investor is looking for something differently. They're marking successful traction, whatever that means, on completely different sort of timelines and milestones. And so it's always important to ask every investor what they are looking for, because it's not one answer for everyone. And so for us, understanding traction, post revenue, being able to have paying customers for whatever it is that you're building, being able to show what you have learned from those customers and how you're adapting your product as a result of that. Reflecting on where you have failed, why that has failed, and again, what have you learned from that, and included in this new version of your product as you continue to build. All of that is really, really critical. having, bespoke partnerships, proprietary data, anything that can really show that what you're building is truly defensible. I think that there's, especially in this world of AI, there's 100 different businesses doing the exact same thing, all built on AI. And at that point, it's just like a race to see who can, build the biggest business the quickest. And the switching costs are so low for that end consumer as well. So like, what is truly defensible there? And understanding that for founders is where I am spending a lot more time these days, is unpacking that. What makes you different? What makes you uniquely able to win and win big in this market is what's critical. And to be honest, in a deck, I actually ask for my decks to be sent before the meeting. I don't want to see a deck brought up in a meeting or be pitched to with a deck in a meeting, unless we're specifically pulling it up to look at data or some other, product roadmap or something very specific, just because I can read a deck in my own time. I can sort of like understand that. I think the critical pieces that I'm always looking for is, again, like founder team, who's building this, why are they uniquely able to do this, what is the problem, what is the solution you have at hand, how are you thinking about structuring the build out of your solution. But all of this is taken with the grain of salt that 100% of the pitch decks that we see are not the same business 365 days down the road. Early stage businesses, you have to be dynamic. And so for us, it's really understanding who this person is, what they're building. Again, it goes back to the people, like what we discussed at the beginning. And like, how are these people the most uniquely able to really tackle what they're building? And I get a lot more of that from a conversation, more so than a deck in any event.
You set me up for the question that we always like to close out with, because whether an investor, whether a founder, we are not doing what we do in a silo. It is a community. So we love closing out every episode by paying it forward to the village, to our people. Go for it. But I would love for you to shout out a brown woman business product that you love, that you're using, that you're like, oh my God, people need to know about this, and tell us about it.
I can jump in first. So I want to shout out actually two incredible women. The first is Shivani Siroya. She's building Tala Business, and the second is Sunira Madani. Previously built Fat Merchant, which became Stacks, which she exited, and then now building Worth AI. Both powerhouse women building in the financial services and financial infrastructure space, really addressing and sort of furthering what we need in both of their respective industries. Have met both of them, delightful human beings, and I think that much like Rathna, they're building in maybe industries that you don't necessarily or very commonly see incredible women building and building from the top, but they bring a robust set of personal experience and know-how and understanding of the spaces and places that they're building in, and just love seeing what they're doing and why they're doing it.
Love it. And how perfect, because Sunira was our first guest on season 1, our first ever episode. And she came on as an investor, talking, of course, about her journey as a founder. But it's such a beautiful thing to see that you start as an operator and say, oh my God, I really realize the value of supporting the ecosystem. And so what a perfect example. And Shivani Soria as well. Oh my God, powerhouses. Rathna, what about you?
So I'm actually going to shout out products created by Brown Girls. I don't actually have a relationship with them, but I'm obsessed with what they're doing. So Diaspora, I love cooking, and so that's really my downtime. And they have spices. She's doing a lot of, the ethos seems a lot like Runway to Street, but it really is about spices and supporting farmers in the subcontinent and bringing that, it's like a direct consumer angle to it. So I really love that business, and I'm a fan of the products. It is really, I care about organic and natural and all of that. And so that is one brand. The other brand is one that we have powered. I do not know the founder directly, Deepa, but Live Tinted is a beauty product.
Love Live Tinted. I love them.
Yeah. So those two, yes. Yeah. I know the co-founder.
Those are.
Them, but yeah.
That is wonderful and a great way to really close off a conversation of reminding women that we're building in all kinds of spaces, and if you see a problem, identify a problem, have the experience in it to make the leap as you did, Rathna, and really just so much success. And Mahati, it's always so important to see women like you representing who is moving the capital in the ecosystem. That is everything. Truly, truly amazing what you guys, I mean, and there's a few other firms like this that I really think are so important, but you guys are really like leading the pack with this. So thank you so much.
For more insights around angel investing, South Asian female founder stories, and belonging to a community that builds and funds Brown Girl businesses, join the conversation online at Brown Girl Angels. As always, thanks for listening to Brown Girls Money Moves with me, Bhargavi Varma.